With an understanding of the CSS box model and display property, you should be ready to lay out your first web page. If you are like me, you love board games. However, not all board games are equal. I believe I am just the guy to enlighten folks on the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's right, the purpose of this website will be to give board game reviews. Here's what we want the web page to look like when we are done. Consider the layout by imagining the elements as boxes. The wrapper div will have a set width and contain all other elements. The level 1 heading will be the first element inside the wrapper div. The nav div will be the next. Inside the nav, the A elements for the hyperlinks will be displayed horizontally. The content div will be next and will have a thin border. An IMG element for the game image, the level 2 heading, the ratings div, and the text for the review will be inside the content div. There is a CSS property that will allow the text to wrap around the image. The IMG elements for the stars will be inside the ratings div. The footer div will be the last element inside the wrapper div. Notice the images folder is already on the desktop. In this folder, there are 3 images that will be included in the site. Use the link under the video to download the images if you would like to work along. Open up an HTML editor and create a new file. The page we are going to create is for the game Settlers of Catan. So name the file settlers.html and save it in the same location as the images folder. For me, that is on the desktop. After putting in the basic HTML tags, enter BGR:"Settlers of Catan" for the title. Without worrying about the style or layout of the page, add all the content from the mockup into the body. Add a level 1 heading with the text Board Game Revolution. Create a div with an ID of nav that will be used for the navigation menu. In the nav div, add links for a few board games in alphabetical order. The first game on the list is Pandemic, so link to a page that we will create later named pandemic.html. The second game on the list is Settlers of Catan, so link to the page we are currently working on named settlers.html. The last game to add is Splendor, which will link to a file named splendor.html. After the nav div, add a div with an ID of content that will include 1 or more images representing the game, the title of the game, a rating for the game ranging from 0 to 5 stars, and a written review of the game. Inside the content div, add the image from the images folder named settlers.jpg. This image is a homemade version of the game that includes pieces that my wife and I sculpted from clay, painted, and baked. Add a level 2 heading for the title of the game, Settlers of Catan. Next, add a div with rating as the ID. To rate this game with 4 of 5 stars, add an IMG element using the star.gif image from the images folder. Copy and paste this until you have a total of 5 IMG elements using the star.gif image. Then change the source of the last image to the star_faded.gif image. Instead of writing a review right now, let's add in some temporary fake text. Search the web for lorem ipsum. This is simply dummy text commonly used since the 1500s in the printing and typesetting industry. Once you find some dummy text, just copy and paste the text into your HTML page. Add the P element and paste in the first paragraph. Add another P element and paste in the second paragraph. Go to the Settlers of Catan website and then copy the URL from the address bar. Add a sentence to the first paragraph of the review that includes the A element for a hyperlink to the site. Paste in the URL for the source to ensure it is correct. Add the target attribute with a value of _blank so the site will open in a new window. Add the domain name in as the text for the hyperlink. After the content div, add a div with an ID of footer. In this div, use the HTML special character code &copy semicolon, which will cause the browser to display the copyright sign. Following the special character, add the year and your name. Save the page and open it in a web browser to ensure all the content is showing up. You should see the level 1 heading, Board Game Revolution. You should have 3 links. The image for the game is quite large. Under the image, you should see the Level 2 heading for Settlers of Catan. 4 of the 5 stars should be yellow. The dummy lorem ipsum text should appear as 2 paragraphs. You should see the hyperlink to the Catan website. And finally, the footer text should be at the bottom of the page. Go back through the video to find your mistakes if any of the content is not showing as expected. When you are ready to move on, look again at the mockup of the site. The body is light blue, the wrapper is light gray, the Level 1 heading and the nav div are darker gray. The links in the nav div are light gray while the links in the content div are light blue. Refer to the mockup frequently as you write the CSS code for the page. Create a new file to use as the style sheet for the site and save it in the same location of the HTML page as styles.css. Create a style for the body element. Set the margin to 0 and set the background color to steel blue. Switch back to the HTML and add the code to link to the CSS page. Make sure both the HTML and CSS pages are saved, then refresh the page. If you have linked correctly to the CSS page and your CSS code is written correctly, the background color of the page should change to blue. There are many styles to add to get this site looking like the mockup. Let's start by changing the game image to a more appropriate size. In the HTML, give the image an ID of game image. Save the page and then switch over to the CSS. Use the hashtag to create a style for the IMG element with the game image ID. Set the width to 240 pixels. Let's also create a style for the star images. For this, just add the hashtag followed by rating, the ID of the div the images are in. Add a space, specify the IMG element, and put in the curly braces. Now you are ready to add a style to all images that are in the rating div. Set the width to 50 pixels and add a margin of 6 pixels. Save and refresh the page to ensure the size of the images are correct. Going back to the HTML, add a div with an ID of wrapper that will wrap around all the content that is in the body. To improve readability, indent all the code that is between the div and closed div tags. In the CSS, add a style for the wrapper div. Set the width of the div to 800 pixels. Set the background color to silver. To center the div on the page, set the margin to 0 auto. The 0 indicates that the top and bottom margins should be 0 pixels. The auto indicates that the left margin and the right margin should be as large as possible. Because both the left and right margins are being set to auto, they will stretch out to an equal size on both sides of the wrapper. Save and refresh the page. As the size of the window changes, the wrapper stays centered on the page. If the window has a width less than 800 pixels, a scroll bar appears at the bottom of the browser. Note the space above the wrapper div is actually resulting from the default margin of the H1 element. Back in the CSS, create a style for the H1 element. Set the margin to 0. Set the padding to 20 pixels, set the background color to gray, and set the color of the text to white. While we are here, let's set a style for the nav div. Set the background color to gray. Also set the styles for the links that are in the nav div. Set the display to inline block, set the color to silver. To get rid of the underline, set the text decoration to none, set the font size to 16 point. Set the padding to 4 pixels on the top and bottom and 20 pixels on the left and right. And set the border top right radius to 4 pixels to make the top right corner of each link in the nav rounded. Copy, paste, and modify the code to do the same for the top left corner. Finally, set a style to make it more apparent when the links inside the nav are hovered over. Here, simply change the background color to silver. And set the color of the text to steel blue. Save and refresh the page. When you hover over the nav items, the background color should change, making the rounded corners visible. Of course, the links to the other games do not work yet because the other pages of the site have not been created. Back in the CSS, create a style for the content div. Set the padding to 10 pixels. Set the margin to 10 pixels. And set the border to 1 pixel, solid, and gray. Save and refresh the page. The border makes it clear what is inside the content div. How can we get the text to wrap around the game image? There is a nifty solution for this. Go to the CSS and find the style you had created for Game Image. Add the CSS float property and set it to left. This will cause the image to be taken out of the normal flow of the page and float to the left of the div it is inside of. Add a margin right of 10 pixels and a margin bottom of 10 pixels to create some space between the image and the text that is wrapping around it. Save and refresh the page. Now we are ready for the final touches. Back in the CSS, create a style for the H2 element. Set the margin to 0. Set the font size to 30 point. Create a style for the links inside the content div. Set the color to steel blue. Set the text decoration to none. Create a style to apply a hover effect to the links inside the content div. Set the border to 1 pixel, solid, and steel blue. Create a style for the footer div. Set the text align to center. Set the padding to 12 pixels. Save and refresh. Once you have the page laid out and looking the way you want, create the other pages of the site. If you placed all the CSS in an external style sheet, then creating new pages using those same styles should be a breeze. Go back to the code for settlers.html and save the file as pandemic.html in the same location. Notice the code you are now looking at is for the new pandemic.html page. Change the title to pandemic. The page is already linking to the style sheet. Change the H2 element to pandemic. Change the last star.gif image to star_faded.gif so that the rating of the game will be 3 of 5 stars. Finally, remove the link to the Catan website from the first paragraph. Save and refresh the page. If you still see the Settlers of Catan page, that is because you are still looking at the settlers.html page. Click on the pandemic link. You can see the new page is now being displayed. The only thing left to do to the page is change the image and the text for the review. Go back to the code for pandemic.html and save as splendor.html. Be sure you are working on the new splendor.html page before making changes. Change the title to Splendor. Change the text in the H2 element to Splendor. Change the source of all the star img elements to star.gif so that the rating of the game will be a perfect 5. Save and refresh the page. Now you should be able to click on the navigation items to move from page to page. For now, my friends, that is all I have to say about laying out a website with HTML and CSS.